Why nice people are the most dangerous. The shocking truth we've all been taught that being nice is a virtue. That kindness is the highest moral standard, that the world needs more people who are patient, forgiving, and willing to put others first. And on the surface, that makes sense. We imagine that nice people make society better, that they bring harmony where there is conflict and light where there is darkness. But what if I told you that nice people, yes, the ones who always smile, who always say yes, who never want to hurt anyone, can be the most dangerous people of all? What if I told you that behind their endless politeness and self-sacrifice, there is something far more destructive lurking beneath the surface? Think about it. Have you ever met someone who was so nice that it almost seemed unnatural? Someone who agreed with everything, avoided confrontation at all costs, and never seemed to have a strong opinion of their own. On the surface, they appear harmless. They are the people who don't want to cause trouble, who just want everyone to get along, who would rather suffer quietly than make anyone else uncomfortable. But here's the problem: when someone suppresses their true feelings, their true thoughts, their true desires for too long, it doesn't just disappear. It builds, it festers, and one day it explodes. But the danger doesn't always come in explosive ways. Sometimes it is quiet, subtle, manipulative. Have you ever dealt with someone who made you feel guilty for things you didn't even do? Who used their kindness as a weapon, making you feel like you owed them something just because they had been so nice to you? This is another way that seemingly nice people can become dangerous, not through aggression, but through passive control. They don't demand things outright, but they make you feel obligated. They don't express anger directly, but they make you feel like the bad person for setting a boundary. They don't say what they want, but they make their disappointment so heavy that you feel like you have no choice but to give in.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
And yet, we rarely call this out. Why? Because we assume that danger always looks like aggression. We assume that the real threats are the loud ones, the people who are openly mean, openly cruel, openly selfish. But the truth is, the most dangerous people are often the ones who hide their true selves behind a mask of relentless politeness. Because they are not just deceiving others, they are deceiving themselves. So ask yourself, have you ever been too nice for your own good? Have you ever said yes when you wanted to say no? Have you ever avoided confrontation to keep the peace, only to find yourself feeling used, unseen, or exhausted? And if so, what is that doing to you? What happens to a person who spends their whole life suppressing their truth just to make others comfortable? The hidden cost of being too nice, how self-sacrifice turns into self-destruction. Being nice feels like the right thing to do. We are taught that if we are kind, patient, and forgiving, the world will reward us. That if we always put others first, we will be appreciated, loved, and valued. But what happens when that kindness goes too far? What happens when being nice is no longer about being a good person, but about neglecting yourself entirely? At first, it seems harmless. You go out of your way to help others, even when you don't have the time or energy. You avoid saying no because you don't want to disappoint anyone. You let small things slide. Someone interrupts you. Someone takes advantage of your generosity, and someone disrespects your time because you tell yourself that it's not worth making a big deal about. But slowly, almost without realizing it, you start to disappear. Your voice becomes softer. Your presence becomes smaller. Your needs become secondary, not just to others, but to yourself. And this is where the real danger begins. Because when you constantly prioritize others over yourself, people start to assume that you don't have limits, and that you don't mind being the one who always adjusts, always compromises, always gives more than you receive. And the more you allow it, the more it happens. Not because people are necessarily cruel, but because you've taught them that this is how you operate. That you are the one who will always say yes. That you are the one who will never push back. But here's the problem. No one can live like that forever. Self-sacrifice is not an infinite resource. You can only give so much before there is nothing left to give. And when that moment comes, it doesn't just feel like exhaustion, it feels like betrayal. You start to resent the very people you once wanted to help. You start to feel anger toward the friends, family members, and colleagues who always seem to take without giving anything in return. But whose fault is that? Is it theirs for taking, or is it yours for never setting boundaries in the first place? Nice people are dangerous because they do not express their boundaries. They allow them to be crossed over and over again until they are filled with silent resentment. They do not say what they really think. They bottle it up, pretending to agree, while inside they grow more disconnected from their own truth. They do not stand up for themselves. They let others walk all over them, convincing themselves that it is the price they must pay to be good. And then one day they break. They snap. And when they do, the destruction is far worse than if they had simply been honest from the start. This is why some of the most shocking acts of betrayal, outbursts of violence, or complete emotional breakdowns come from the people you least expect. The ones who always seemed so kind. The ones who never disagreed. The ones who always put everyone else first. Because when you spend your whole life suppressing your truth, when you refuse to set boundaries, when you convince yourself that your needs don't matter, but you don't just become selfless, you become a ticking time bomb. Nice people don't become dangerous because they are naturally cruel. They become dangerous because they suppress themselves for so long that something inside them eventually breaks. And when it does, it can manifest in ways they never expected: explosive meltdowns, passive-aggressive manipulation, or a deep sense of bitterness that poisons every relationship they have. Think about it. How many times have you done something for someone out of obligation rather than genuine desire? How many times have you held back your true thoughts because you didn't want to upset someone? How many times have you ignored your exhaustion, your frustration, your own needs, just to keep the peace? And does that peace really exist, or is it just an illusion hiding a storm that is building inside you? The most dangerous thing about being too nice is that it makes you invisible to others, and eventually to yourself. You lose touch with who you are, what you want, what you need. You become a person who exists only for the comfort of those around you, rather than a person who lives fully in their own truth. And when you finally realize this, when the weight of self-abandonment becomes too much to bear, what happens then? Do you lash out? Do you disappear entirely? Or do you finally decide that being kind to yourself is just as important as being kind to others? So ask yourself, is your kindness genuine, or is it a survival mechanism? Are you truly giving from a place of love, or are you giving because you are afraid of what will happen if you stop? And if you knew that saying no, setting boundaries, and prioritizing yourself wouldn't make you a bad person, would you finally allow yourself to do it? The dark side of suppressed truth, why bottled emotions always find a way to escape. There is a dangerous misconception that being nice means avoiding conflict. That if we never raise our voices, never push back, never assert ourselves, we are somehow morally superior. But this idea is not only flawed, it is destructive. Because the truth is, emotions do not simply disappear when they are ignored. Frustration does not vanish just because we refuse to express it. Anger does not dissolve just because we smile through it. Suppressed emotions do not die, they transform. And when they finally surface, they do so in ways that are far more damaging than if they had been acknowledged in the first place. Have you ever noticed how some of the nicest people you know have moments where they suddenly explode? How do they go from being endlessly patient to completely losing their temper over something seemingly small? That is not random. That is the result of years, maybe decades, of unspoken resentment. Every time they said yes when they wanted to say no, every time they swallowed their disappointment, every time they let someone else take advantage of their kindness, they were adding pressure to an emotional dam. And that dam can only hold so much before it cracks. But not all suppressed emotions explode outwardly. Sometimes they turn inward. They become self-doubt, anxiety, and depression. When someone convinces themselves that their feelings don't matter, that their needs are less important than keeping the peace, they start to internalize the idea that they are undeserving of happiness. They become people who apologize for existing, who shrink themselves until they are barely visible, who feel guilty for taking up space. And the worst part, the world rewards them for it. Society calls them selfless, humble, good-hearted. But what society does not see is the suffering beneath the surface. The real danger of being too nice is not just that others take advantage, it's that you begin to lose yourself. You forget what it feels like to say what you truly mean, to ask for what you actually want, to stand firm in your own identity without constantly worrying about how others will perceive you. And when you lose yourself, you don't just become invisible, you become vulnerable. Vulnerable to manipulation, to toxic relationships, to people who recognize that your inability to say no makes you easy to control. And that is where the cycle continues. The more you suppress, the more you attract people who benefit from your silence. The more you avoid confrontation, the more you allow those around you to decide who you are, what you deserve, and how much of yourself you are allowed to express. But here's the truth. If you do not choose your own identity, the world will choose it for you. And the world does not always choose kindly. So ask yourself, how much of your life is truly yours? How many of your choices are made because you genuinely want them? And how many are made because you are afraid of disappointing someone? How often do you suppress your own emotions just to maintain an illusion of peace? And if you knew that expressing your truth wouldn't make you unkind, wouldn't make you selfish, wouldn't make you a bad person, would you finally allow yourself to do it? Breaking free from the illusion of niceness, why true kindness requires strength. The world tells us that being nice means being agreeable, accommodating, and endlessly forgiving. That the best people are the ones who never make waves, never challenge the status quo, never prioritize themselves over others. But what if that definition of kindness is completely wrong? What if true kindness is not about being passive, but about being strong? Not about avoiding conflict, but about facing it with honesty. Not about sacrificing yourself for others, but about respecting yourself enough to know when to walk away. Niceness, as we've been taught, is often an illusion, a performance, a carefully maintained mask that keeps us from discomfort, from rejection, from the fear of being seen as selfish. But real kindness, the kind that actually matters, is not about making people like you. It is about being honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. It is about setting boundaries, even when they disappoint others. It is about recognizing that your own well-being is just as important as anyone else's. For too long, we have confused kindness with weakness. We have believed that being good means always saying yes, always being available, always putting others before ourselves. But kindness without strength is not kindness at all, it is self-destruction. Because when you give without limits, when you accommodate without question, when you suppress your own needs for so long that you forget what they even are, you are not being good, you are being erased. And a person who has erased themselves cannot truly give anything meaningful to the world. The strongest people are not the ones who never say no. They are the ones who know when to say it. They are the ones who understand that boundaries are not walls, they are the foundation of self-respect. They are the ones who realize that protecting their energy, their time, and their emotional well-being is not selfish, it is necessary. Because only when you are whole can you truly give something real to others. This is the paradox of niceness. The more you suppress yourself to make others comfortable, the more you suffer. And the more you suffer, the more resentment builds. And eventually, that resentment either poisons your relationships or destroys you from the inside out. But strength, the kind that comes from knowing your worth, from speaking your truth, from refusing to be a martyr for the comfort of others, that kind of strength does not just protect you. It allows you to be a force of real good in the world. So the question is, are you willing to let go of the illusion of niceness to embrace something deeper? Are you willing to stop being the person who is always agreeable, always accommodating, always bending to the will of others? Are you willing to be kind in a way that is honest, even when it is uncomfortable? And most importantly, are you willing to finally be kind to yourself? Because in the end, that is what true kindness really is. Not self-sacrifice, not people-pleasing, not endless suppression of your own needs for the sake of keeping the peace. True kindness is the courage to stand in your own truth, to protect your own energy, to honor your own worth. And when you can do that, when you can be both kind and strong, that is when you stop being dangerous to yourself and start being powerful in a way that truly matters.